don't know. Recording, live streams working.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The minion took care of.
Is Jason Lyons even in the meeting? No.
Maybe he's sitting there.
I know.
We have the Code of Conduct presented by Mr. Lyons and Mr. Saboni.
Okay, good evening, Board of Education, Mr. Sorticio, Mrs. Feldman, Ms. Tomasulo. This is our annual reading of our District Code of Conduct. Pretty much what happens during the year is all of our buildings have a shared decision-making team that meet several times a year. Typically, it was a little less this year due to COVID, but we did meet. It involves a group of teachers, typically a parent or two, and we talk mostly about our code of conduct. So tonight we'd like to review all of the changes to the code. There's not a bunch of them this year, but every year we keep fine-tuning it and we keep making it better and better. The first change is located on page 13, section 9, letter B. This came out of Eden Elementary through Mrs. LaRosa's shared decision-making team, and she really just wanted the language to match what they have at the GLP. So if you notice, we have a strike through of what we're gonna eliminate and then the new language. And this just has to do with electronic devices being deemed inappropriate by administration. The next section Mr. Lyons is going to talk about is our academic eligibility and probation.
Good evening. When I first came in and we started working with the ineligibility policy, we noticed there were some areas that were subjective. So a student could get above a 70, like a 77, but could receive a U. Or a student could have a 67 and get an S. And so after working with the shared decision-making team and talking with them about why it was like that in the past, and I know that they had reviewed or went out and met in Medina, and there would be like effort included in the process. The problem was for us, especially with extras in athletics, is it's hard when there's somebody who wants to participate with a 77 and they can't because there's a U. So what we did is we worked with the shared decision-making team. We basically cleaned it up. That basically if you're below 70 in 2 or more classes, then that would qualify you. It's cut and dry. It's not subjective, because there could be a student that has an 89 average and doesn't really give a lot of effort. And there could be somebody, with a 77 and they get a U and they're actually giving a lot of effort. So it was more to make it more objective. We attempted something last year working with shared decision-making called AN, which is assistance needed. Basically just muddied the waters worse. We were trying to give some sort of like leeway for a student that for one time on a test, they did poorly on a test, but it was a way to adjust for it. So I'm trying to move this down. Sorry, guys. Lucinda, can I have a little help here? Just trying to move this down. There we go. The other thing that we did is we cleaned up the language. It was repetitive for 3 or more classes. We want to remove that and clean up. I don't know why I can't get my thing over here to move up the document. Two fingers. Oh, see that? I need an expert for that. Thank you so much. So we cleaned that up, but the one thing that some of the teachers that using from that model from Medina, they wanted to have the option if somebody was under 70, if they were having a lot of good effort, but they pointed out that there could be one assignment that maybe dropped them under that 70. So the way that it works is basically if you have 70 or above, you're going to be getting an S. But if you are below 70, if the teacher sees that was like one assignment or just maybe a tough test they had, they can still give them the S to participate. So it still continues to give the flexibility to the teacher, but at the same time, we don't want to penalize somebody who has earned a grade of an 77 or 82 based on perceived lack of effort. And that's really the only change that we made in here. We adjusted the chart to reflect those changes in the ineligibility policy. We removed the AN for assistance needed. And we're working with the shared decision-making team. They're like, why do you have that last part? It's just a duplicate. So that's why it's struck out. And that's it. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Lyons, just to be clear, you're making adjustments to the academic eligibility policy to make it more fair and equitable?
Yeah, to be more objective. Previous, the way it was is that there would be sometimes, I want to be clear, it wasn't always, somebody like gets a 77. I think of that because of an experience that we had, and they got a U. And the reason is they could measure kind of like a effort, and it's a very difficult, sometimes it may not look like effort, but there's effort in the background. They might have done a lot of effort at home. So that's why we went to if you are basically 70 and above, you're going to be getting an S. The part that the teacher really in the shared decision-making, they wanted the ability if they were below 70 and they really did see effort and there was some struggling, that they could still give them an S so they could participate, be it musical, be it athletics or anything like that.
So what you're saying, and just, I'm going to say it a different way, is making that subtle change, that second subtle change, gives teachers the opportunity to recognize when a student is trying, and that's all we ask is they try their best and achieve to their level, and maybe hasn't crossed whatever, academic or percentage threshold that would automatically allow. So, teachers are with students at a much deeper level than you are or I am or the board is, and it gives them the opportunity to recognize when someone who's a struggling learner is putting forth that effort, and thus gives them an opportunity to participate and play.
That is correct.
Okay. And you've also cleared up any of the muddy waters where, a student, and I think I had at least one of my three at home, has a high average but doesn't try very hard. And the old model, that child could have received a U, even though they're well beyond any academic threshold.
Correct.
Okay, so that's clear. But because you and I have had a lot of conversations about this lately, the most important part of the AEP is the interventions and the assistance. Now, the code of conduct, there's no place for those to be listed, but at some point down the road, we're gonna continue those conversations, and we can roll out how we're working on improving on the academic intervention side of things. Okay. Any questions from the board? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Budget scenarios for adoption, Mrs. Feldman.
Good evening. Welcome to the next phase, the budget presentation. I'm going to present 3 scenarios for the Board of Education. I will need a decision by the end of the board meeting of which scenario you choose that you want me to move forward with, as I have to report to New York State tomorrow. So our agenda, we're going to talk about, I'm sure everyone's hearing in the news, all this federal stimulus money that's coming around. We're going to talk about it. There's the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriation, CRRSA. That's how I will refer to it going forward. There is the American Response Plan Act of 2021, ARPA, and that's how that will be referred to future in the presentation. We're going to talk about a new property tax credit program that was adopted. We're going to look at the budget. We're going to look at expenditures and revenues, tax implications, reserve implications, and then the remaining budget schedule. So the total federal stimulus dollars awarded to New York State education, I'm going at this level because there's still some fine tuning to the numbers that were reported to school districts with the budgetary runs. So from March 13th to September 30th of 2022, CARES Act funding were released in the amount of $1.1 billion to New York State. These funds replace state aid. In other words, dollar for dollar that a school district received CARES Act funding, their state aid was reduced by it. The CRSSA Act, which runs from March 13th of 2020 to September 30th of 2023, $3.8 billion, does not replace state aid. ARP Act goes for the same dates to start March 13th of 2020 through September 30th of 2024, $8.2 billion. I want to point out, you'll see the little notation in the corner, ASBO New York presentation. That's where a lot of my information came. I took their slides and that presentation was just April 14th. So this is one-time stimulus money, similar to the ARA funds from 2012. This cannot be the basis for a budget going further because at some point in time, these funds will end. They will end in either 2022, 23, or 24. And when the funds are gone, you can't have reoccurring costs based on them because you'll have no way to keep the programs up. So I like this. This was from the presentation. With great one-shot federal funding comes great fiscal responsibility. I thought it was perfect as we discuss this a little further. So unlike last year's CARES funding, there were the ESSER and grants funds were allocated to school districts. The CRRSA and the ARPA grants are grants in aid. And if you look at the bottom in the yellow, these are my notations. It's not part of the voter authorized budget process. Districts must submit proposals to New York State Department of Education for approval prior to spending or receiving any aid. We still have no guidelines. They're expected to be out in the next couple of weeks, which will be much too late for this to have a major impact on our budget, even if it were part of it, which it is not. And they're mandated by law to be recorded as special aid funds. That's where all our grants for school districts are recorded. This is kind of an accounting thing, but that's how I know it definitely is not to be part of the general fund budget. The general fund is where the voter authorized budget is accounted for. And there is no equitable service requirement. What is equitable service? Well, when we received CARES funding, there were some regulations that said students who resided in our school district, but were educated either in a public or a private school outside of the school district, that public or private school, if the students met certain requirements for our title grants, they were eligible for those schools to receive some sort of funding from us. We cannot give them a check, but we can buy resources for them. Any questions? The American Rescue Plan Act, and this one, they told us right out on this presentation that the allocations might appear and the runs might change slightly. So they're working on the updating the guidance. They're recommending to us that we should prioritize non-recurring expenses. In other words, we should not be supporting salaries or, for example, utilities that will go forward in the future or start a new program and hire a new staff person, because these funds will end. And if we don't have another source of revenue, we won't be able to continue on. So districts that receive more than $500 per pupil in the funding will have it divided out, and they're coming up with a strategy for that. This strategy, they're already talking about, the numbers don't work, so they're still working on it. Eden does receive more than $500 per pupil, so If there are guidance and restrictions on how much you can spend per year, Eden will have to follow those guidance. And the thing is, we will have to post a plan for our usage on our webpage by July 1st of 2021 to be in compliance. And we need to reflect stakeholder involvement in the development of this project. This is kind of a good news sort of scenario. Without any explanation, this is all that I know, so I'm sorry I can't answer additional questions. They've created in the budget a new property tax relief credit. The property owner must own the property and pay more than 6% of their gross income in property taxes. So property owners earning less than $75,000 will see the full benefit of the credit, and it's phased out entirely for those earning more than $250,000. So I simply put a little calculation on the bottom using the $75,000. 6% of $75,000 is $4,500. So my understanding at this time is if your property taxes are more than $4,500, you may be eligible for this credit. That's really all I know about this at this time. As more information becomes available, I'll share it with the board. So now we're going to look at the budget. We're going to look at our proposed expenditures. We've talked in great detail of the budget, and then we've rolled them up into these categories that are on the left. So we have general support, which is the business office, the district office, buildings and grounds, and things that are not related to instructional, direct instructional with the students. They're not related with pupil transportation. And then we've lumped together, because this is how the accounting is done, employee benefits, debt service, civic activities, and interfund transfers to come up with our total expenditures. So where I'm going to start is with the 2021 adopted budget. Our general support was $3.9 million, instructional $16 million, pupil transportation was $2.3 million, and then the lumped together areas were $9 million, coming up with $31,285,337 in expenditures. Now, I've given you 3 different levy proposal suggestions: a 1.2 levy, a 0.8 levy, and a 0 levy increase. So as you can see, the numbers for all 3 scenarios are the same, because the question isn't how much do we need to spend, it's how will we fund what we feel we need to move forward. So there have been some cuts made per the directive of the superintendent since the last time we met. So the overall number is less than last time. So our general support is $3.8 million. That's down from $3.9 million. A significant contributing factor was we did reduce our buildings and grounds budget by the fact that we no longer need a building condition survey, which is done this year and will not be done for another 5 years. Instructional has increased to 17.3, almost 17.4 million. And that's where you want to see your money. That's the direct program for the kids. Pupil transportation, you're going to look at it and go, wait a minute, we just talked about bringing kids back and additional bus runs. But last year we were walking into the abyss and we had no idea what transportation in a pandemic would be. So we budgeted extra funds in there. So we're dropping that down because we've lived through a pandemic and we realized we didn't need all those funds. So we're going from 2.3 million down to 1.8 million. Employee benefits, debt service, civic activities, interfund transfers, they're from 9 million up to 9.5 million. Predominantly that increase is due to employee benefits, which includes health insurance. It includes the employer share of Medicare and Medicaid. It includes the workers' compensation, and it also includes the retirement system costs, of which we're mandated and told how much per dollar of salaries we have to spend. So our total comes to $32.6 million in all 3 scenarios. Are there any questions at this point? Revenue scenarios. Again, I'm going to talk about the larger buckets, and then I'll get into the detail. I'll go through the adopted budget just like I did last time. Property, school taxes. Then we have our state aid, our federal aid, miscellaneous, which is local revenues and things like our BOCES refund and sales tax from Erie County, interfund transfers, appropriated fund balance. And I just want to take a moment to stop and explain what an appropriated fund balance is. It's your money in your savings that you are appropriating to fund the following year's budget to reduce property taxes. That's the technical use of appropriated fund balance. And then, of course, our reserves, which are for specific purposes. So our property tax for 2021 adopted budget was $15.1 million. State aid was $11.8 million. Federal aid was $30,000. Miscellaneous, $1.7. Interfund transfer, $29,000. Appropriated fund balance was $1.86 million, and our reserves were $647,000 to come up to $31,285,337, which matched our revenues and gave us a balanced budget. So the first proposal is a 1.2% levy increase. So our property taxes would be through 15.3 million. Our state aid has gone up to 12.9 million. Federal aid is at 30,000, miscellaneous 1.7, interfund transfer 29,000. Appropriated fund balance goes up to 1.88 million and 647,210 for reserves. So as you can see, you're going to start to see a pattern emerge, and the pattern is, excuse me one moment, I have to move this out of my line of sight, sorry. The pattern you're going to see emerge is that, yep, I think something happened. Yes. How do I get back into my Zoom? Yes, I'm not getting it. It's backwards. Oh, there it is up top. No. There it is. Okay, up here. Thank you. Thank you. So with a 0.8% levy increase, property taxes would go from 15.1 to 15.2 million. State aid would remain the same as it will be in all the scenarios. Federal aid would remain the same. Miscellaneous remains the same in all scenarios. Interfund transfer. And as you can see, the appropriated fund balance, which we explained was to offset property taxes, that goes up to 1.9 million, and our reserves stay the same, all to get to the same 32,637,781. Proposal number 3 is a 0% levy increase, which means that our property taxes would stay 15.1 million. And then our appropriated fund balance, which I'm going to just jump down to now, would go up to $2.2 million to give us the same ending balance. Are there questions?
Yeah, if you don't use all the appropriate balance for lowering the taxes, what else can we use it for?
The question was, if you don't use all the appropriated balance for taxes, what can we use it for? We can't use it without a budgetary expense for it. So I can only use what's in the budget, but the extra money, it's there for emergencies. So if we had an emergency where we thought we were going to get the 12.9 million of state aid and suddenly that was pulled back, the board can enact it to be able to use that to cover it. So it can be used for other things. It's always used to support the budget.
Yeah, but it's for more than 1 year, correct?
Correct, but that's not our entire fund balance.
Well, I'm just saying this appropriation doesn't have to be used in 1 year.
This is the amount of our entire fund balance that I would need to close my budget gap.
Yeah, I understand it, and you've used the appropriated money, correct?
Correct.
But you wouldn't, if on a different scenario where the taxes were increased 0.8 instead of 0.0, you could use less of the appropriated money.
Yes, that's what the graph shows. Yes.
That was my point.
Okay. Thank you.
So Laura, state aid's going up 1.1 million or 9.7%. Which one of those three that you explained at the beginning, CARES, CP, whatever, is there any of that related to that state money or?
No, that's a really good question. I'm glad you asked, because when I said it was a grant and wasn't available for use for the voter authorized budget, that's exactly the truth of it.
Okay. So basically, we've got 1.1 million increase from the state, which in my 5 years on this board, has never seen a number, anything like that. 9.7% increase. So that's a big find from the state, and thank you. Okay, no, just curious about that. Is there any indication what the following year might look like? No.
We never get that.
No, I know. It's just, I'm just wondering, is it going 1.1 the other way next year? So that's, to be determined, but.
There was legislation out there to keep increasing foundation aid until we're fully funded. We are not fully funded. So as long as that isn't changed in the next budget year, we should get a little more again next year.
Okay.
Laura, can I just ask you a question on that? Is that new legislation or? Because
That was enacted as part of the budget.
Oh, that's good, because they've been talking about that for years and it's
Mhm.
never come to fruition.
Yes, in
Awesome.
08, 09, they
Yeah.
came up with the new formulas and they've not fully funded them yet. So
Awesome.
are we ready to move forward?
Yep.
Okay. So all scenarios show that my revenues equal my expenditures, which gives us a balanced budget. So what else does that tell us, though? That there's other information. Let's look at our 10-year tax history. True value is your assessment after the equalization rates are applied. And this is the true value of the entire district, not one specific township. So in 2011-12, for every $1,000 of true value assessment, taxpayers paid $19.13. Come down to 2021, and they're paying $17.03 on that 1,000 per true value of their homes.
So are you saying the tax rate actually went down?
For the district as a whole, yes.
And the big caveat to that is equalization rate.
Correct.
So-
Equalization rate is what skews two townships in different rates.
So last year, if you lived in the town of Boston, you actually saw a price or your taxes decrease
Correct.
because they had growth in their community that basically,
They had assessments closer to market value, which allowed them to lower their equalization rate.
Right.
Or raise their equalization rate.
okay. I mean, this is just a true fact of, even though taxes go up, this is a true rate where we're trying to, utilize the tax levy as the best we can and trying to reduce that. So, when you go from $19.13 down to $17.03, we're really trying to control the cost of the tax levy, within the school board. So it's nice to see.
So potential tax increases based on that district-wide true value. So of course, 0% would be a $0 increase per thousand. And a $100,000 home would not receive any increase. 0.8% of the levy would raise $121,925 in the levy, which would take the true rate from $17.03 to $17.17, or 14 cents per thousand increase, so that's $14 on 100,000. A 1.2% increase would increase the total levy by $177,259, would take us from 1703 to 1723, or 20 cents per thousand, or $20 on a $100,000 home. The thing I want to point out, the only thing that is truly in this Board of Education's control is the dollar increase for the levy. Everything else gets skewed by assessments and equalization rates. So you cannot benefit one town over another, a neighbor over a neighbor. The only thing you can control is the total dollar of the levy increase. So then the questions are, do you as a board feel you want to go out at $0? You want to add to the levy by $121,925? Or do you want to add to the levy by $177,259? Or do you want to say another percentage that I'll go back and then the numbers will come through? So
my understanding with some of this federal money and state money is we're not allowed to reduce taxes.
it cannot be used to reduce taxes because it's not part of that accounting area.
So technically, we couldn't go out at a negative without jeopardizing those funds.
Without jeopardizing program.
Okay.
It would be program you would be jeopardizing.
Okay.
Yeah, let's not forget that we had a lot of discussions already in our budget presentations, and we've come way back from what our original expenditure plan was. In this budget, we have maintained programs, and we've actually had some plans to increase some programs, and that was prior to any understanding of these federal funds. Those federal funds can be utilized to enhance further, but again, as Laura pointed out, very separate from this budget. And you know, your option here, as Laura presented, is how much of the fund balance do you want to utilize? Your traditional amount of about 1.7 or 1.8 or over $2 million. And that's really the board's decision. But I do want to reiterate that we maintained and improved programs that will directly benefit children. We maintained our staffing. We've looked at some other creative means to address staffing as well, and we can support all of those scenarios, all of those things in the three different scenarios that Laura presented.
So I used $647,000 of reserves. Reserves I am limited to. I cannot use more reserves unless we're unfunding them than our expenditures. So I'm projecting that at the end of 2021, our workers' comp reserve will have $205,000 in it. And I am saying this budget will deplete that to $88,000 at the end of that cycle. Our unemployment reserve will go from $299,000 down to $193,000. Our employee retirement system contribution for our support staff will go from 2.2 million down to 2 million. Our teacher retirement contribution will take that reserve from 300,000 down to 200,000. Our liability reserve, I would recommend keeping the same. Our tax certiorari, we would keep the same. Our employee benefit, that's accrued benefit liability, that is, we cannot use more than we use to pay out for staff leaving for benefits that they've earned. That would go from $967,000 down to $845,000. And our repair reserve would stay at $192,000. So these reserves, which are eligible to use for budgetary purposes, would go from 4.7 million down to 4.1 million. Voter authorized reserves. These are the reserves that Propositions 2 and 3 will be asking voters on purchasing buses and equipment for the maintenance department and technology. Those two reserves, I cannot spend any of these without voter authorization. So our bus equipment would go from $964,000 down to $396,000. Technology would go from 702,000 down to 531,000. And because we are not doing a capital project vote, that would stay static at 225,000. That fund had $3.2 million in it back in November, and the voters authorized us in December to do another capital project and to use that $3 million that we had saved to offset some of the tax money that would be used. So we've gone from 6.6 million at the end of this year down to 5.2 million in our reserves.
Well, can any of these funds that we're getting be used to boost our reserves?
They will have to be used for specific items, and we'll have to wait and see how that plays into our year end.
And don't they have to be used by certain timeframes too?
Yes, 2022, 2023, and 2024.
So that's a good number of years to use those money. Yeah.
Correct. But you can't do anything for reoccurring costs.
No, I understand that. But some construction or something like that wouldn't necessarily be a recurring cost, correct?
But the construction has to fit the criteria for the grant, because these are grants. And we don't have that guidance yet. I will provide more information when that becomes available. That may be available for our May meeting. It may have to wait till our June to provide more information on what those grants can be used for. But I will come back and inform you what allowances they're going to let us. Right now, it's a huge billboard and there's lots to put on it, but they haven't given us any guidance what we can put on it and how to do it. So it's hard to anticipate those funds, which is why I wanted to talk about them in the first place, because they cannot help us with this year's budget. And so we just have to wait and let things play out.
Do you have any feeling on what the ground rules would be for it?
They've said things like the Education Act from 1965. I haven't researched that. The IDEA Act, I haven't researched that yet, because I'm waiting, because I know they're going to go from these huge acts that have occurred in the last 50 years down to here's a listing of things you can use. And I'm waiting for that guidance because it's just too voluminous otherwise. Ready? Okay. So our remaining schedule, tomorrow I will report whatever your decision is on which level to New York State. There will be a budget hearing at 7 p.m. on May 4th. That's the annual meeting where the budget presentation by Mr. Sortisio and I is presented to the taxpayers. It's where the board sits in the audience. You're not part of a board at that time for that presentation. And then May 18th, a budget vote, hopefully in person from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. in the middle school, high school auditorium. We've already been given some of our updated guidance has already come to Mrs. Tomasula. So we're working on making sure we're in compliance. And that is my presentation. But I would like to ask, I don't know that I had it put in the agenda, but I do need an answer of, and you need to have some discussion, which level of funding from the taxpayers you're looking for.
So Laura, we went to 1.2 to 0.8. Why? Can we still go out at 1.2 without other implications on taxes, or is the 0.8 the new tax formula?
The tax formula has been updated with more guidance released from the state on our capital numbers. So yes.
So if we go out at-
0.8 is a simple majority. 1.2 is a super majority.
Okay, so we can basically probably take 1.2 off the table, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
That should've been like-
so now it's down to 0.8 or 0%. Any thoughts on either of those two numbers?
28 seems right for me, because maybe we'll be able to use that other money some other way.
Could you, please turn your mic on when you talk, okay? It's okay.
I mean, for me, I think personally, I'm comfortable with 0. I think this would be probably the year to try and have 0 impact for, the community. It's I think we're in a decent position right now, and correct me if I'm wrong, to make this kind of decision. But I think for me, it would be a nice way to say thank you to the community for supporting us. And, I know in years past, when the budget has passed, it's created a lot of strife for people whose taxes sometimes go up, sometimes don't go up, like we just talked about with the equalization rate. I think this year has been hard enough for people, so if we can give them one less thing to stress about, I would be all for that. And as long as we're still in a comfortable position for programming and things like that, I am personally comfortable with zero.
As was stated before, all of these scenarios support the program budget that was put forth with the collaboration of administration and the superintendent.
I would agree with Jen that it's been a challenging year fiscally for many people, emotionally for virtually everybody. The state gave us a little bit more money than we're used to getting from the state. And I've been on the board 5 years now, 6 years, 6 years. Oh, there you go. Time flies. We're rarely in a situation to be able to do that. Usually we've even tried to go out over the cap because of the shortfall that we had. So I think if ever there's a time, this is certainly the time, and I would be in favor of going out at zero.
I'm with you, Jen and Jack, that I would love to see us be able to do this for the community. It's been such a tough year. And if we could go out with 0%, that would just be a gift to them and a thank you. I agree with you.
Okay, I'll change my position on it. You were very persuasive.
I'm gonna agree with everybody else. I think Marlene's kind of on board with zero as well too. But back when we last met on the 24th of March, we were expecting about 925,000 from the state at the current run. Now we're at 1.1 million. I think that even gives us more of a comfort level to go out at 0% and kind of ease the burden on the community as best we can and go from there. So I think the agreement is we're going to go out at zero, Laura.
All right, I will prepare our paperwork for tomorrow and submit to New York State that we're going out with a 0% increase.
Are you, Jeff, you're good with that?
Are you asking me a question, Ms. Horsham?
I am asking if you're.
If I'm okay with it, so a couple of things. So 1.2 was kept on our presentation because that's where we had been all along. And just to be clear and transparent with the community, it seemed to make sense to continue to present that. So thank you for asking that question, whether that needed a supermajority. Laura and I have talked a lot about 0%. I agree with what I've heard, and I feel the same way that if there is a year to go out at zero, it is this one. This is not a sustainable model going forward, though. I want the community to hear that from me. I want the board to hear that from me. We are using your plan is to use a significant amount of reserves. Once your reserves are gone, they're gone. And they all have a very particular use. I agree our community's been incredibly supportive, and they've certainly been impacted pretty intensely in the last year. And they've supported our capital project in really an overwhelming fashion. And so I do think it is right to give back as much as we can and in the way that we can, or the way that you can as a Board of Education. So my short answer to your question is yes, I support this idea as well.
And we're going out at the 32,637,000 as our expenditures.
That is correct.
Okay. I think we're all good with that.
Yes. Thank you very much.
And we're also going out with the budget or the buses and the technology, Prop 2 and Prop 3, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. That's not in this $32 million number, correct?
Correct.
That's been a change.
Yes, that is a change, and it's a change to more synchronize us with how other districts do this.
Yes, I agree. But if you go back and look at previous budgets, that was grouped into the total budget number.
That was grouped in up until the summer, and so to be comparative, it was better to move to the more synchronous
Correct.
style of doing it.
A lot of new words this year.
Okay. Do we have a request to withdraw specific items from the consent agenda? No. That recommended that upon the recommendation of the superintendent, consensus items be approved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Motion carried.
This is the approximate position and time that the board has designated to receive statements from individuals and groups. The board will review all statements, then respond appropriately at a future meeting. All persons in attendance are required to sign the attendance sheet and designate their representation status. For example, parent, teacher, bus driver, chamber of commerce, etc. There is a 2-minute time limit.
Pat, would you mind pressing the button on that mic so the green light comes on?
Sure, there we go.
Thank you.
Okay, my name is Pat Profik. I'm a parent of 4, and one of my kids is a senior this year. A year ago, we were all naive, and we had no idea what we were in for. We were all upset that, the kids were losing their prom, they were losing graduation, they were losing their senior day. This year's class has lost so much more. And my daughter told me today that she feels like the school doesn't care. She hasn't heard anything about senior day. She hasn't heard anything about graduation and all kinds of things. Now, I know you guys care. And it's frustrating for me as a parent because this is such a big lifetime event for these kids. They've gone to school together since pre-K or kindergarten. This year, they only see half their class because of the way the cohorts work. And I would like to ask, I spoke with Mr. Lyons and he said things are starting to progress because I know there's all the restrictions from Albany and things that you have to follow. But I would like to ask if you can do everything and anything to make these kids feel special. Last year's graduation was great as far as getting pictures taken and things like that for the kids, but they weren't together. And I know that there's all these rules, but I would appreciate it as a parent if you could do everything you can to get them to be together, to graduate and have that memory and have that ceremony. And I know you guys are going to do the best you can under the guidelines. I just would like to ask if there's anything you can do above and aboard. They've heard rumors of other kids going to Darien Lake. They don't know if there's any chance they can. They're doing their 2021 picture. One might be in the grass, one might be in the snow, but it's taken this long to get to it. And I think they're all frustrated. And I don't know if anybody else has expressed this as a parent, but they deserve this. They have worked so hard this year on their own a lot. And I would just like to ask, do everything you can for them. I would really appreciate it. Thank you.
Pat, I'm in the same boat as you.
Yeah.
I know the seniors are really frustrated right now.
Mhm.
And to the point that Darien Lake comment came up to me by about 5 seniors.
They lost last year's prom. They lost this year's prom.
I know, and they're rather upset right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been great, some of the stuff they've been able to do. They got soccer in during the lull. The musical was amazing and things like that, but nobody could come and see it. They couldn't hear the cheers. And they need to be together that one last time because we all know they're not going to see each other as much as they think. Even though we're Eden and it's small, they're still not going to see each other. They need this. They need this to be together, if at all possible. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mrs. Profik.
Hi, everybody. My name is Matt Gould. I'm the father also of a senior. I didn't come here to talk about that, but I will echo 110,000% what Mrs. Profik has said. It's interesting listening to my son, who is on student council, on the executive council. You've seen him at board meetings in the past, Caleb. His level of frustration is pretty much through the roof. They've erred on the side of caution to this point, and they do not, I don't think, want to throw caution to the wind. They want things to be safe, but they've reached their limit. And I'll just leave it at that, or I'll get emotional about it. I did come here to thank the board, to thank Mr. Sorticio, Mr. Lyons, Mr. Savoni, Mr. Bliss, Mrs. Karstedt, everybody, for allowing us to put a musical together. Also don't want to get emotional about that, but you're right. Not hearing an audience was tough. It's really tough. 15 seniors involved in this year's production deserved more than that. It's to no one else's fault, and we're supremely thankful we were given the opportunity to do what we were able to do with the show. So thank you so very much. The other announcement I'll make about that, the show ran this weekend. We just received permission this morning from Music Theater International, which is our licensing company, to put it back up as an on-demand performance through May 2nd, for viewing through May 4th, which is awesome. You can get back to our website at edenmusical.com, purchase a ticket, watch it at your leisure over a 48-hour period after beginning to watch it. Hopefully we'll give a lot more people an opportunity to watch it that couldn't this past weekend. We think the students did a remarkable job this year, considering the circumstances. And again, I just thank you for the opportunity for us to be able to do that. We do look forward to next year having an audience for sure.
Yeah.
So, but getting back to the senior thing, I do not want to do graduation the way I was involved in graduation last year either. Under zero circumstances do I think that's appropriate for this year or needs to happen. I think they can be in person. I think we can do it safely. I think we've proven that even with the musical, so and with athletics. So hopefully we can make that happen for them. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
To new business appointments. If we go to B. Oh, thank you. That upon the recommendation of the superintendent, after successfully completing her probationary period, Jordan Edwards be permanently appointed as a registered professional nurse effective May 18th, 2021.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Motion carried.
That upon the recommendation of the superintendent, Elizabeth Rogers be appointed on probation as a bus driver effective April 14th, 2021, and ending December 28th, 2021. Salary is based upon CSEA contract level 9, step 1 through 2.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Motion carried.
That upon the recommendation of the superintendent, Barbara Palmieri be appointed on probation as a clerk typist effective April 21st, 2021 and ending January 5th, 2022. Salary is based upon CSEA contract level 5, step 1 through 2.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Motion carried.
That upon the recommendation of the superintendent, Mrs. Rita Sturr, head election inspector, Mrs. Virginia Gunther, Mrs. Ann Sheehan, Mrs. Nancy Putney, Mrs. Paula Simkowiak, and Mrs. Marion Phelan be appointed as election inspectors for the annual meeting and budget vote on May 18th, 2021, at a rate of $13.40 per hour, and further authorize the district clerk to fill any vacancies in these positions which may occur prior to May 18th, 2021, with individuals from the Board of Elections Inspector Personnel List.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Motion carried.
That upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the 2020-2021 school year transportation billing rates be approved as follows. Bus driver rate, $34.54 per hour. Bus attendant rate, $31.86 per hour. Mileage rate, $2.42 per mile. Note, rates will be used if the New York State Kids to Parks grants for field trips can be utilized this year.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Motion carried.
That upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education of the Eden Central School District, at a public meeting held on April 20th, 2021, hereby adopts a resolution approving the 2021-2022 tentative BOCES administrative budget in the amount of $3,286,094.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Motion carried.
That upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education of the Eden Central School District cast one vote for the following candidates for the BOCES Board of Education with terms to expire June 30th, 2024. Robert Carpenter, Sylvester Cleary, Nancy Rankins, Nancy Stock.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Motion carried.
That upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the 2021-2022 commitment for BOCES services be approved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstained? Motion carried.
And we don't have business reports. So superintendent's report.
Okay. Earlier this evening, we had a parent forum that was designed to discuss the revised reopening of school plan. The parent forum was a requirement from the new guidelines from the New York State Department of Health. We reviewed many of the details of the plan, which will actually allow us to bring more students back to school. As the board's aware, our GLP students pre-K through second grade returned a week ago Monday. After some logistic issues, which are to be expected the first couple of days with drop off and pick up, it's been smooth sailing. Those students are attending school 4 days a week at the moment. This coming Monday, April 26th, students in grades 3 through 6 will return to school on a 4-day-a-week model as well. The team's goal is to return pre-K through 6 to a 5-day-a-week model starting on May 3rd. We need to make some adjustments with transportation. I'm confident Mary Banker will have that handled, and we need to make a couple of adjustments with how we will address our remote learners. But that is a very positive development. Unfortunately, our students in grades 7 through 12, based on the New York State Department of Health guidelines, must remain in a hybrid format. That's very unfortunate, but the guidelines follow, the New York State Department of Health guidelines follow the CDC guidelines, and the CDC is clear in any area that's a high infection rate. Students that are not cohorted, and again, cohorting means they move through their day virtually together, have to remain 6 feet apart. And we simply don't have the capacity in our middle school, high school to return those students back in mass like we do in the other areas. Very unfortunate. I'm disappointed. I'm certainly disappointed for our seniors as well. Any questions about the return to school plan? And thank you for those of you who were able to tune in earlier this evening. Okay. We did have 2 community members turn in their petitions to run for the school board. Ms. Horschel and Mr. Cudahy, in a very scientific method. Ms. Horschel will be the first on the ballot because her name was drawn on whatever way Ms. Thomas-Sewell did that. So, Mr. Cudahy, if you have an issue with being second, please take it up with Ms. Thomas-Sewell. Thank you, Mrs. Feldman, for the budget presentation and for all of your efforts. You've taught me quite a bit this year, and I really appreciate working with you. You really have an outstanding way of presenting the budget and in a way even someone like me can understand. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Gould, this was already on my list to talk about, but
bravo. I wish I could give you and all everyone involved a standing ovation.
My wife and I enjoyed our Saturday morning coffee while we were watching Something Rotten, and I spit my coffee out a couple times because I was laughing out loud. That didn't make her too happy, but what a fantastic show. And I know that performers, whether they're actors, actresses, or athletes, they get their energy from the crowd. You must have brought in a crowd and not told me, because the energy on that stage was amazing. And the level of talent was remarkable. I had to keep reminding myself as I was watching this event how things were done, and some students were remote, some were in person, some were lip syncing, so on and so forth. Could have fooled me, man. I thought you had everybody going at the same time, and really, really impressed. And I wish I was sitting in the front row, and next year I will be. So thanks so much. Really impressed. Okay. And the final item I have to share with the board is I now have a new expertise, and that's in being an ice cream taster. If you happen to see on Facebook, I just want to thank Eric Aron and the crew at DQ for having me come over and do the one, what was it, the one scoop or one spoon taste test, and the brownie blizzard was a hit. And he also donated a cone for all of our students and our staff, so that was very much appreciated. That's all I have.
Why, thank you. And, okay, no student report, obviously, but, right? Okay, board report roundtable. I just want to start because Mr. Gould, thank you so much for what you did for the kids and putting on that play and all the work I just was impressed with all of that, but I was so impressed with the play itself. I was like you, Jeff, laughing in my living room. I just wish I'd been there in person to experience that. But oh my God, you gave them something special in this terrible year, and something they will always remember, and we will too. So yeah, it wasn't ideal, but it was pretty wonderful, even though it was something rotten. That's all I have to say.
I just wanted to ask a quick question. Listening, I mean, I'm not a parent of a senior, but listening to the last two parents speak, it was hard for me as an educator and as a mom not to get choked up. I mean, this stinks for these kids. So my question is, I think on the calendar, there is a date for prom. Are we having discussions about that? Do we have any idea what's going on?
Yeah, so
And I don't mean to put you
no,
on the
no,
spot.
no.
I know
I'm
it's
trying to
hard,
be
but-
I'm trying to be publicly appropriate with my frustration, because the regulations around prom are draconian. And I cannot imagine a teenager who, if we brought them in and said, you can only be with this group. If you dance, we have to do in shifts. You have to stand in this circle. You have to stand in that circle. There can be no intermingling whatsoever. On and on and on, almost like it's the 1500s or something. So, I'll leave it to Mr. Lyons and his team to work with students about whether that's acceptable to them or not. I can tell you that they have put every measure in place so that proms don't occur. And it's unfortunate. I'm sorry, I should have addressed this in my report. My heart breaks for our seniors as well. I certainly, Mr. Lyons and I talk just about every day. I know we're going to have a lot to talk about tomorrow, in trying to make the rest of this year memorable. He will share with you that we've gone back and forth at how we could at least bring our seniors in more.